Hello and welcome to Newsweek South Asia, your one-stop destination for in-depth analysis of security challenges, regional conflicts, and the evolving threat of terrorism. Let's take a look at the headlines first. Islamabad mosque blast exposes Pakistan's internal security collapse. US treated Pakistan worse than toilet paper, says Khwaja Asif. And religious tensions escalate in Pakistan-occupied Gilgit-Baltistan. A deadly suicide bombing at a Shia mosque in Pakistan's capital has ripped through Islamabad's carefully curated image of security, exposing deep internal fault lines within the Pakistani state. As worshippers were targeted during Friday prayers, Islamabad rushed to blame India and Afghanistan, once again deflecting attention from its own intelligence failures, sectarian fault lines, and the long-term consequences of nurturing terrorist networks now turning inward.
This was the deadliest suicide attack in Pakistan's capital in more than a decade. A gunman opened fire at the gates of a Shia mosque in Islamabad's Tarlai Kalan area before detonating an explosive vest inside the Khadija Tul Kubra Imam Barga. At least 31 people were killed, more than 160 wounded. Images from the site showed blood-soaked prayer halls, shattered glass, and panicked worshippers scrambling for safety. The attacker struck after being challenged by security guards, raising immediate questions about intelligence preparedness even in one of Pakistan's most heavily guarded cities. Dozens of injured were found not just inside the mosque but also in the surrounding compound gardens, underlining the scale of the breach.
मस्जिद में गया नमाज पढ़ने के लिए जुमे का तो वहाँ ब्लास्ट हो गया और वो शदीद ज़ख्मी है अभी तो है और एक मेरे भतीजे का बेटा भी वो भी शहीद हो गया वहाँ तो अभी ये इधर ऑपरेशन थिएटर में.
Survivors described a terrifying sequence: gunfire, silence, and then the explosion just as prayers began.
पहले फायर हुई है, कोई 5-6 फायर हुए हैं, उसके बाद ये नहीं कोई आवाज़ या इस तरह का कुछ भी नहीं आया. बाद में तकरीबन भी ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा 15-20 सेकंड गुजरे होंगे, धमाका हुआ. धमाके में बस भगदड़ मच गई है, कोई किधर उधर जा रहा था, कोई किधर जा रहा था, इस तरह. मुझे महसूस नहीं हुआ कि मुझे कुछ लगा हुआ है. मेरी ये कमर पे ना ऐसे बिल्कुल सुन्न हो गई थी जैसे कोई वो नहीं होती. इस तरह का मुझे पैर पता चला है कि पैर मुझे भी कुछ लगे हैं.
Within hours, Pakistan's Defence Minister Khwaja Asif blamed India and Afghanistan, claiming without evidence that the attacker had links across the border. New Delhi rejected the accusations as baseless, reiterating its condemnation of terrorism in all forms. Kabul too dismissed the claims, calling the remarks hasty and irresponsible. Conflict monitors, including ACLED, say the attack bears the hallmark of the Islamic State. That assessment gained weight after Islamic State in Pakistan claimed responsibility overnight, releasing details of the attacker's movements and the operation. Authorities later confirmed the bomber was a Pakistani national who had recently travelled to Afghanistan. Several facilitators, including family members, were arrested in raids across Islamabad and northwestern Pakistan. For Pakistan's Shia community, already a vulnerable minority in a predominantly Sunni country of 241 million, this attack is part of a grim pattern. Shias have repeatedly been targeted by sectarian groups such as Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and Islamic State, both of which openly brand them heretics. The Islamic State has previously described Pakistani Shias as a human reservoir, justifying attacks on civilians inside places of worship. Local residents say the tragedy was preventable.
ये जो इमाम बारगाह है यहाँ नमाज जुम्मा के टाइम जो है बहुत ज़्यादा रश होता है, तो मेरे हिसाब में एज ए इंतज़ामिया सिक्योरिटी लोगों को गवर्नमेंट को चाहिए था कि यहाँ पे सिक्योरिटी प्रोवाइड करते और सिक्योरिटी की नाअहलियों की वजह से ये हादसा जो है हुआ है, जो कि नहीं होना चाहिए, किसी भी जगह पे नहीं होना चाहिए.
Analysts say the rush to externalize blame reflects mounting pressure on Pakistan's security establishment, already grappling with escalating violence in Balochistan, sustained attacks by the TTP, and growing unrest in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Experts argue Islamabad's long-standing policy of nurturing extremist groups has created a cycle of blowback now hitting the heart of the capital.
The Shias in Pakistan have been traditionally attacked. In fact, Pakistan is a story of, a country which lost its democratic destiny, a country which is occupied by its own army, a country where terrorist forces are active within Pakistan, and we have to take note, have been occasionally against India too. Yes, India is absolutely correct, and I am glad to take note that India has condemned the attack, that's what we should do wherever it happens under the moon, because we as a country are against all terrorist attacks, terrorism in all its manifestations, and this is one of the worst. That it has happened in Pakistan does not and should not give us any particular pleasure.
As families wait outside Islamabad's hospitals for news of loved ones, the blast has laid bare a stark reality. Pakistan's internal security crisis is no longer confined to its peripheries. The capital itself is now a target, exposing the high cost of denial, deflection, and decades of militant patronage.
Pakistan's Defence Minister Khwaja Asif has delivered a candid assessment of Islamabad's past strategic choices, acknowledging that the country's alignment with the United States during the Afghan wars contributed to long-term instability at home. His remarks come amid renewed terror attacks inside Pakistan, raising questions about the legacy of policies that shaped the region's security landscape for decades. Addressing Pakistan's National Assembly, Defence Minister Khwaja Asif accused the United States of using Islamabad for strategic purposes and then discarding it. But beyond the rhetoric directed at Washington, his statement amounted to a rare acknowledgement that Pakistan's own establishment willingly embedded itself in proxy conflicts, decisions that empowered terrorist networks across the region. Asif named former military rulers Ziaul Haq and Pervez Musharraf as architects of these policies. Under Zia, Pakistan became the epicenter of the anti-Soviet jihad in Afghanistan during the 1980s. Under Musharraf, Islamabad realigned with Washington after 9/11, even as terrorist infrastructure within its borders remained deeply entrenched. Asif admitted that terrorism Pakistan faces today is blowback from those decisions.
What the Pakistan Defence Minister is saying is that not only the terrorist networks and terror mechanisms against India woven into state strategy, but they are presently also integrated and an integral part of Pakistan's state policy. They may be having a remorse, or they may be having a come to Allah moment of reality and talking the truth, but that does not mean that Pakistan is going to stop its shenanigans, its mechanisms regarding terror.
Asif further dismantled the narrative that Pakistan's Afghan involvement was rooted in religious duty. He told lawmakers that war was not fought for Islam but to appease a superpower. This admission directly challenges decades of state-driven rhetoric that mobilized citizens under the banner of jihad. Today, Pakistan continues to face sustained extremist violence, most recently evidenced by the Islamic State claimed suicide bombing at a Shia mosque in Islamabad that killed at least 31 worshippers and injured more than 160, highlighting ongoing sectarian tensions and persistent security challenges within the capital. Yet experts argue that the very extremist ecosystem now targeting Pakistan was incubated during the years of state-backed proxy warfare.
The irony and the tragedy with Pakistan is that the Pakistani elite, which includes the military elite as well as the political elite, always went along in a permanent mode of conflict. They never paid attention to the infrastructure of their own country. First, there was money coming in from the US and NATO for fighting the Soviets in Afghanistan. Then the money was there to fight the Taliban in Afghanistan. Then to stabilize Pakistan with American aid. Then the China CPEC corridor, money coming in. So the Pakistani state in a way did not undertake any serious economic management of its own country. Because the monies which were needed to keep the machine running, and it's essentially a feudal system amongst the elite, that was coming in through such activities. No industrialization, no modernization, as a consequence of which all provinces in Pakistan are up in the arms, literally and virtually.
The consequences have not been limited to Pakistan alone. Terror organizations such as Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba, which have historically operated from or found sanctuary within Pakistan, have long faced international accusations of carrying out cross-border attacks, contributing to sustained instability in both Afghanistan and India. International scrutiny intensified when the Financial Action Task Force placed Pakistan on its grey list from 2018 to 2022 over deficiencies in curbing terror financing. The move exposed systemic weaknesses in oversight mechanisms and strained Pakistan's already fragile economy. Even after its removal from the list, concerns persist regarding the durability of reforms and the dismantling of terrorist networks. Khwaja Asif's remarks may have been framed as criticism of Washington, but they effectively confirm a deeper reality. Pakistan's long-standing strategy of leveraging terror actors for geopolitical influence has backfired. Decades of militarized foreign policy, ideological mobilization, and selective counter-terror enforcement have left Pakistan confronting the very forces it once enabled. A high-level consultation in New Delhi has reignited debate on religious freedom in South Asia, drawing sharp contrasts between India's constitutional safeguards and what experts described as deep structural discrimination in Pakistan and Bangladesh. A new comparative report released at the forum noted that while India's constitutional safeguards provide a structured legal foundation for pluralism, concerns persist over enforcement in parts of the region, with Pakistan and Bangladesh facing deeper structural challenges, including discrimination and shrinking civic space.
A high-level consultation in New Delhi turned the spotlight on the broader state of religious freedom in South Asia, underscoring a widening regional divide. A report released at the forum argued that while India's challenges largely stem from gaps in implementation, Pakistan and Bangladesh face more entrenched structural problems, where legal frameworks and political systems themselves enable discrimination against minority communities. In Pakistan, experts pointed to blasphemy laws as a central instrument enabling persecution. Accusations, often unverified, have triggered mob violence, imprisonment, and forced displacement, particularly targeting Christians, Hindus, and Ahmadis. The concern, analysts say, is not merely misuse but structural legitimization.
Blasphemy laws, to put it in a very crude term, can be said as license to kill by the country. And because it's very sensitive topic in that country, taking the case of Pakistan, no one will question it or goes against it because it's their main religious identity, and it's, you can simply say, legalization of persecutions. And now with time, the, you can say, strictness of blasphemy laws are even hardening.
Beyond minorities, sectarian hierarchies within the Muslim population itself, including Ahmadiyas, Sindhi Muslims, and Baloch communities, reflect deep fault lines. In provinces like Balochistan, allegations of economic extraction without equitable development have intensified grievances, reinforcing perceptions of a Punjabi-dominated power structure.
As I was saying, when you start the process of othering, then finally, you are left with a very small group. They are all Muslims. There is a community in the northwest frontier. There is, people who are Ahmadiyyas. There are Sindhi Muslims and there are Baloch Muslims. But the problem is they don't look at them as Muslims. They look them as through sectarian lenses. And I think that is why, the entire sort of state, religious sort of dominated state is of Punjabi Muslims in Pakistan. So obviously all the resources from Balochistan, which is a very resource-rich state, has been extracted from there, and they are kind of, left on their own. So unless I think their grievances are addressed, the violence will not stop.
At the consultation, Bangladesh was also placed under scrutiny. The report highlighted the long-term demographic decline of Hindus in Bangladesh, a trend experts say reflects recurring insecurity, land dispossession, and targeted violence during political unrest. Critics argue that successive administrations have failed to dismantle structural vulnerabilities, often framing attacks as collateral damage of instability rather than addressing patterns of minority targeting.
After Muhammad Yunus has taken over as the administrator of Bangladesh, you can see the condition of Hindus right now. You can see the condition of other minorities living in Bangladesh. It is terrible. It is pitiable over there.
Muhammad Yunus tries to legitimize the violence against minority communities under the name of political, let's say, unrest or sort of these things. And since he has a standing at the international level, somehow we gets the traction. So Muhammad Yunus really is a part of the problem, not the solution.
Another recurring theme was the shrinking space for journalists and civil society actors in both countries. Experts warned that without media protection and judicial independence, accountability mechanisms collapse, leaving minorities increasingly vulnerable.
States like Pakistan, which are almost dysfunctional state, and Bangladesh, which is on the way to become a dysfunctional state, things are very bad. So journalists have no protection, no sort of safety of life.
The New Delhi consultation may have been the trigger, but the message extended far beyond the venue. According to the report, the core issue is structural, where legal systems, political incentives, and institutional cultures fail to safeguard pluralism. For Pakistan and Bangladesh, the warning from experts is stark. Without deep legal reforms and institutional accountability, religious discrimination will remain embedded in state practice rather than treated as an aberration.
Shia worshippers were targeted yet again as a bomb tore through a mosque, exposing the persistent vulnerability of the community in Pakistan. In Pakistan-occupied Gilgit-Baltistan, where Shias form the majority, the attack has triggered fierce protests and painful memories of the past massacres. Demonstrators say this is not an isolated tragedy, but part of a continuing pattern of violence, impunity, and systemic neglect that has left an entire community feeling besieged and unheard. Give a report.
In Pakistan-occupied Gilgit-Baltistan, anger is spilling onto the streets as members of the Shia community protest over what they describe as years of unchecked repression. From targeted attacks on places of worship to failure to hold perpetrators accountable, many believe a pattern of discrimination and insecurity has taken root. The latest bombing on a Shia mosque in Islamabad has only deepened fears, reinforcing concerns over the safety of religious minorities under Pakistan's rule. The Shia community is in majority in POGB. However, they continue to feel vulnerable, marginalized, and unheard under the existing system.
18 जनाजे कोलिस्तान से आए, 16 जनाजे लालूसर से आए, 10 जनाजे चिलास से आए, 4 जनाजे मनावर से आए। उसी 2012 में 5 जनाजे यूनिवर्सिटी में यौम हुसैन मनाते हुए शहीद किए गए। आज तक कोई कातिल नहीं पकड़ा गया। कहीं पे किसी आलिम को शहीद किया जाता था, कहीं पे किसी ब्यूरोक्रेट को शहीद किया जाता था, कहीं पे किसी सियासतदान को शहीद किया जाता था या किसी शख्सियत को कत्ल किया जाता था। लेकिन 80 के दहाई के बाद इज्तिमाई तौर पे शियान अली इब्न अबी तालिब के खून बहाना शुरू हुआ है। नस्ल कुशी के इरादे से शियान अली इब्न अबी तालिब को पाकिस्तान के वजूद से मिटाने के लिए बाकायदा इज्तिमाई तौर पे खून खराबा हुआ है।
In Pakistan-occupied Gilgit-Baltistan, memories of past atrocities remain painfully alive. From coordinated attacks in the late 1980s to repeated targeted killings over the years, many families still await justice. Protesters say the wounds have never healed because accountability never followed. They state that successive administrations failed to protect lives, rebuild trust, or address deep-rooted grievances. Even today, insecurity, neglect, and political silence continue to define daily life, leaving communities feeling abandoned and unprotected.
फिर 1988 में गिलगित बल्तिस्तान को निशाना बनाया गया। बगैर किसी जवाब के, बगैर किसी इश्तियाल अंगेजी के हजारों अफराद पे दहशतगर्दों का लश्कर गिलगित बल्तिस्तान की तरफ रवाना किया गया। 500 किलोमीटर का फासला तय करके ये गिलगित बल्तिस्तान के ऊपर हमलावर हुए। दरमियान में कोई रोक टोक नहीं हुई। इतनी सारी चेक पोस्टें होने के बावजूद, बोंजे में पूरा मुसल्लह अफवाज का क्वार्टर होने के बावजूद, जिगलोट के अंदर मुसल्लह अफवाज की यूनिटें होने के बावजूद इनको फ्री हैंड दिया गया।
What began as targeted violence has now deepened into a larger crisis of religious suppression and systemic neglect. In POGB, communities say they are not only struggling for security but also for dignity and equal rights. Alongside fears of sectarian targeting, the region continues to face weak infrastructure, limited healthcare, poor connectivity, and shrinking economic opportunities. Protesters argue that without genuine political will, accountability, and development, the cycle of marginalization will only intensify, leaving an entire generation trapped between insecurity and deprivation.
And with that, we come to the end of this edition of Newsweek South Asia. We'll be back next week with more news, views, and analysis from the subcontinent. Meanwhile, do keep writing to us at nwsa@nin.com. This is Shivangi Mishra, signing off on behalf of the entire team of Newsweek South Asia. Goodbye and take care.